Okay. I'm going to try to keep an eye on the participant list and let people in as they show up in the waiting room. Um, so welcome again. It's great to see a lot of people that I know and some new people that I don't know. Um, our goal tonight is just to tell you about the Solar Faithful project. It's really not a project any longer now. It's a 501c3, or at least it's been applied for that status. A little bit about our journey, how we got to this point, and mostly about what the offering is that Solar Faithful has. Our hope is that you'll listen, take notes, whatever. Ask your questions in the chat as we go, and then we'll get to those at the end. I think the presentation will probably take between 30 and 40 minutes, and we have 20 to 30 minutes for Q&A. And if we can go along too, we can go past 8 if anybody wants to stay on for more in-depth questions, but feel free to drop out at 8 o'clock. So my name is Steve Mulder. I'm with the Climate Witness Project. The Solar Faithful is a group of people who came together from various different congregations, various different faith backgrounds, various different lines of work, really, but all passionate about creation care and all passionate about solar, and all trying to figure out what's the best way for congregations and faith-based nonprofits to come together and get the best bang for their buck, so to speak, on solar installations. So what you're looking at here is a picture of the folks who really started Solar Faithful, not all of them, but some of them, and have now become the board of directors for Solar Faithful. So like I said, we're now in the process where we are actually a 401c3. I guess we don't have approval yet from the IRA yet. So the key organizations that were involved is Climate Witness Project, as it said, that's my organization. Michigan Interfaith Power and Light, they're located on the east side of the state. And then on the screen there, it says the original Solar Faithful. So there was a group of people who were sort of an informal nonprofit. They called themselves the Solar Faithful. When we got started and started working together, we liked the name so much that we said, well, let's call this larger group the Solar Faithful, or this collaboration, I guess you could say, the Solar Faithful. So that's a little confusing. There was another organization or another effort called Solar Faithful, but now we're using that term for this project. And then Charthouse Energy, which is a solar developer located on the west side of the state, and then Sun Wealth, who is a impact investment group in Boston, Massachusetts. So these are the organizations that have been kind of worked together. We'll tell you just a little bit about how that came to be, and a little bit more about who these organizations are first. So the Climate Witness Project is a project of the Christian Reformed Church and World Renew. And it's really all about enabling congregations and faith-based nonprofits to work together to mitigate the worst impacts of climate change, working in these areas: worship, education, energy stewardship, and advocacy. So energy stewardship is the part where this solar effort comes into play. We're located in the US and Canada. We've got about 1,500 partners. About 350 congregations are involved, and they're from about 25 denominations. So the project was originally a project of the Christian Reformed Church, but it was never for the Christian Reformed Church, and it certainly isn't exclusive to the Christian Reformed Church. And so we welcome any denomination, any faith tradition that wants to work with us on this. The picture in the corner there is of a group of guys who are putting a solar installation in Gallup, New Mexico, at a church called Bethany CRC. And behind them, I think you can see there's a carport, and on top of the carport are solar panels. So there's about, I said about 350 congregations that we work with. I would say about a dozen of those have solar panels, and they all did it the same way. They started a capital campaign. They raised the money. They figured out, what installer to use. They installed the panels. Now they maintain them themselves. And that's fine if you have the resources to do that. But a lot of churches don't have those resources. And when I say resources, I mean money, but also just the expertise, the time, the energy to do all the research, to try to find the right installer, all that sort of stuff. So what when I heard about what a guy named Rick Cruz, who was a fellow Climate Witness Project a regional organizer, he's a member of this church, and he came up with a way to do this that was new to me, and it's called a power purchase agreement. And so he and about 5 or 6 other people in his congregation formed an LLC, and they purchased the panels for their church, and they sold the power from those panels to the church. So that was a cool way to do that. I thought, man, then the church doesn't have to put any money up. The church doesn't have to do all that research and all that work, but they still get the power. So I started talking to lots of people about that, trying to figure out, is that a good way to do it? Is it legal? All those kinds of things. And oops, I went the wrong way. And so I started talking this up, and lots of congregations were interested in it, but always the same thing would happen. They never quite could get it over the finish line because it just became too complicated. So that's my view of how this project started, and that's just from my perspective. So I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Young now from Michigan Interfaith Power and Light for her perspective.
Thanks so much, Steve, and thank you all for joining us this evening. I'll just start by giving you just a brief overview of Michigan IPL. I see a lot of familiar faces, but some new faces. So I just wanted to let you know who we are. Michigan Interfaith Power and Light is part of a national network called Interfaith Power and Light. We were founded in 2002 by Father Charles Morris, a Catholic priest with the Detroit Diocese, who said there ought to be a faith voice when it comes to caring for the environment. And we have collectively over the 40 networks across the country, we represent over 18,000 people of faith and conscience. We are passionate about equipping people of faith to amplify their voices when it comes to caring for creation. One of the things that brings me to this work personally is my dad. When I was very young, the University of Michigan was having a 20-year anniversary celebration for Earth Day. And they brought in a guest speaker, and the ballroom was packed, and it was Barry Commoner, who was very famous at that time. But anyway, I said, oh my gosh, I want to do that. I want to make an impact and make a difference with the environment. That led me to today, where I've in my journey in this work, I have also come to embrace the importance of caring for our neighbors as part of caring for the environment. So for us, this work is not just about being good stewards of our resources, but being good stewards of one another. And so climate justice and standing up for one another and our most vulnerable communities is just as important as part and parcel. And how we got involved in Solar Faithful is we were in the fortunate position to have been in contact with, I think at this point, 36 houses of worship who we have in some way supported in going solar in the state of Michigan. However, among those 36, we're only aware of one belonging to a faith other than Christian, and only or two, there's a synagogue and a mosque, and none that are located in low income or urban communities of color. And we thought, wow, we really need to change this narrative. How do we get involved in that? And that's how we got involved with Solar Faithful.
Okay, and then the original Solar Faithful group, 2 of those members are on the call tonight. And I wonder if, John or Diane, would you be willing to just say a few words about the original Solar Faithful group?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. Hi, everyone. My name is Diane Cheklich, and the original Solar Faithful group actually came out of the Department of Energy Sunshot Solar in Your Community Challenge back in like 2017 and 18. And that was a group of people, as Steve mentioned, that kind of loosely came together. The name of our project was Solar Faithful, and there were a lot of research and some of the templates and other resources that evolved into the organization that we have today. So that group actually got some notice in the Department of Energy, got a mention as one of the better teams in the nationwide program. And the fact that it's evolved into this model that we're talking about with you today, just validates the idea. And I'm proud to have been part of that original group.
Awesome. Thanks, Diane. And then, so I was exposed to this original Solar Faithful group, I think from at a presentation that they were doing at an MIPL meeting on the east side of the state. And I was so excited to see that they had been successful with getting, I think it was 8 or 10 congregations actually up and running with their own PPAs, the power purchase agreements, where they used this investor model. And so after talking to them, I went back to Rob Raffson, who is the president of Charthouse Energy. He and I had talked maybe 5 or 6 years ago about this, and we just didn't have enough interested folks and enough resources, I guess, to get it going at that point. But then with the original Solar Faithful group, we started meeting regularly with Rob, and so then that's how the 501c3 kind of grew out of that. So let me pass it over to Rob, and he can tell you a little bit about Charthouse Energy.
Yeah, Charthouse Energy is a renewable energy developer. We're in Muskegon, Michigan, and we've been in business for about 14 years. And, you know, I've been trying to figure out how to put solar on houses of worship for probably 15 years, probably even before I started the company. And I've invested in several projects to get them going, you know, using my own funds to fund the PPAs. The biggest challenge is that the project sizes are too small to attract normal investors. And so putting together a program like this allows us to get enough houses of worship to collect together to attract very good financing. And SunWealth is willing to work with us to get down to the project sizes that are indicative of the of houses of worship. Additionally, part of what I've done over the running of the business is to include job training for people in low-income communities to actually use the solar project as a stepping stone to people who have traditionally been held out of the construction industry, and use it as an opportunity for them to learn what it is to be a construction worker, and then provide assistance for them to get a permanent job in the industry. So we've been able to add that on to part of the mission of Solar Faithful.
So again, there's these various groups that have come together to form this new organization, Solar Faithful. And I'm going to pass it back to Rob. I just got an email from Jennifer alerting me to the fact that I've got an old version of the mission statement here, but I think, you know, Rob would kind of walk you through this and you'll still get a good idea of what we're all about.
Yeah,
So
I mean, the biggest challenge within faith-based communities is the lack of available funding, and so to be able to provide several different options of how to fund the project, both achieve the savings that comes from having solar, but also providing the creation care, and as I said, the on-ramp for inclusive job training.
Okay, Another board member, John Mirsky, also from the original Solar Faithful, I believe, is going to kind of walk us through the value proposition. You know, why would you want to do solar, and why would you want to do solar with Solar Faithful? John?
Good evening, everyone. Good to see all of you here. Just maybe a word or two about myself. I live in Ann Arbor. The city of Ann Arbor and also the Energy Commission were partners in the original Solar Faithful model. I was an investor in a solar installation that went on the nonprofit Ozone House, which is for at-risk teens here in Ann Arbor, and we used that model just like it had been used for other nonprofits, particularly houses of worship. By the way, I'm retired. After a career in industry, I worked my whole career with the German conglomerate Bosch, and so I bring that experience to bear here. So the question is, why solar, and why solar with Solar Faithful? And we think there are 7 compelling reasons. So the first is, we think it's really, there's a moral imperative for action. Solar power replaces what we typically call gray power. Gray power means what's on the grid, and there's a bit of renewable energy in there, but most of it is fossil fuel related. And when you burn fossil fuels, you get emissions that include greenhouse gases, and those greenhouse gases are like CO2. And then you also have, in the case, some cases, you have leakage in the supply chain, and that's methane, which is also a greenhouse gas. So burning fossil fuels, certainly coal also, is really problematic. When you combust those fuels, you also get what are called EPA criteria pollutants. Some of those form acid rain. They also result in small particulates, which cause all kinds of health problems. And many of these problems are manifested to the greatest degree in neighborhoods that are close to where these power plants are. And most of the time, these are in disadvantaged communities. So we think there's also a moral imperative to reduce the burden on the environment, reduce the burden on people's health, and replace gray power with clean, renewable power that comes from solar energy. So the second commitment is, we are really committed to inclusion and environmental justice. That was already touched on by Steve and Jennifer. We want to serve all faiths, traditions, ethnic groups, and racial groups. And it's indeed our objective that half of our installations are benefiting BIPOC and low-income populations. We also do business with B corporations. For example, we bank with a B corporation. B corporations is a short for benefits corporations. These are corporations that are not just have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize profits for their shareholders, but also have a positive impact on the planet and on people. We also are committed to paying prevailing wages to installers and our maintenance personnel. And finally, we have a diverse board of directors. As you saw at the beginning, we are really working to have win-win outcomes for all stakeholders. The next reason, our third, is by installing solar, you are bearing witness. We know from social sciences that when we take action, that others take notice, our neighbors, people that drive by, and it's by leading by with our own actions, we know that other people, congregants, like I said, neighbors, other houses of worship, they will also start questioning whether or not it makes sense for them to do that. And that's exactly what we want to do. We want to inspire others to also install solar and reduce their impact on the the environment as well as on various communities. The next is our fourth compelling reason. It's easy. Now, Steve talked about this before, and other models were difficult. Certainly one of the biggest obstacles was financial and raising enough capital to be able to do this. But there's other kinds of issues. For example, technical expertise. There's the issue of vetting installers. There's the time involved and the resources involved to be able to go out and get competing quotations. And then simply dealing with all of these things with a limited resource group. And so what we have is we've been put together with our team and with our board advising the team, a group of people who can take over all of this. We all have backgrounds in faith communities. We all have backgrounds in business. And so this is something that we've done. We've been community leaders. So we hope that you can put your faith in us to make this easy for you. The fifth reason is saving money. And you can see this is a little bit down the list. Certainly, we understand that many of you are doing solar for things other than money, based on some of the other compelling reasons that I've given. On the other hand, we recognize that if we save you money, then you're able to spend your resources on things that are more central to your mission. It certainly makes no sense to give more money to investor-owned utilities whose sole responsibility is to maximize their profits for their shareholders. So the key is we have a zero upfront cost, so you don't have to do any fundraising. And we start with 10% off your utility bills. So regardless of where you are, we're going to ensure that you get a 10% saving on your utility bills. And that varies a little bit from utility and what part of the state you're in. But that's our promise, is that you will get at least a 10% discount from your utility bill. And it's our expectation that that will increase over time, as I think Rob will explain later. So the sixth touches on something that Rob mentioned earlier, and that is career training. We will be doing job training to help underserved communities participate in a just energy transition. In doing so, we're giving people skills. We're enabling their families and their family units to earn a steady income and be a part of the overall energy transition. And then finally, seventh, we will also address roof concerns. So before we're going to install solar on your house of worship or on your religious nonprofit, we're going to inspect your roof. We're going to call your attention to any concerns there may be. We will work with you to address those concerns. And then the other thing, just simply for peace of mind, included in the contract that we have is panels can be removed and reinstalled one time at no cost to the entity during the life of the contract. So that's built in. The contract is 25 years. And if for some reason your roof degrades unexpectedly quickly and the solar panels have to be removed in order to address those roofing concerns, that cost is built into the contract. So those are the reasons why we think it's important for you to consider installing solar and doing it through Solar Faithful. And I'm going to turn it over now to Rob, I think. Rob, you're taking it from here, right?
Do you want to touch on block power?
Yeah, okay, I can do that too. So we are focused, as we've been talking about on solar and solar installations, basically replacing, as I mentioned before, gray power from the grid. But there's another element of going green, and that is energy efficiency and electrification. And we have signed a memorandum of understanding with a company out of Brooklyn, New York. It's a minority-led company, called Black Power. And we intend to work with them and with our target customer base to be able to not only provide you renewable energy, but also to ensure that that renewable energy is being used for electrification and for heating, both of heating your air, but also your water, any kitchen appliances that you might have, any other kinds of appliances, and they will also help address deficiencies in your envelope. So that means poor insulation or a leaky envelope, and they have a very similar model to ours, where it's no cost upfront. They do the installation, and the intent is that the future costs that you pay, just like with us, are discounted from what you're currently paying your utility for, typically those natural gas powered, if you will, appliances and systems. So we have a meeting every other week with them, and we're coordinating our activities with them. So really we can offer you a full package to go renewables and also to improve your efficiency and to get off of natural gas and electrify your house of worship or your nonprofit.
Thanks, John. Now
Thank
back
you.
to Rob.
No problem. So we can go to the next slide. Basically, there are two financial options that we offer. And one is the direct purchase as part of the recent incentives. Oh, I can speak up a little bit. Sorry about that. The incentives that the federal government have just put in place include the opportunity for nonprofits and governmental agencies to provide an opportunity for them to take advantage and to decrease the project costs. So the 30, 40, or 50% in federal incentive can be realized by each of the nonprofits. Additionally, in Michigan, we have a lender group that's backed by the state government that can provide the fund the entire project and then get refunded through savings of the congregation as well as the federal incentives. And then the other option is a power purchase agreement where SunWealth funds the project. Chart House Energy or another installer installs the system, and then the congregation pays 10% less than the power produced, or I should say savings created by the power produced for the solar. Along the way, if the congregation wants to buy the system out, they can. And there is in the contract a buyout price, but also can in year 10, 15, and 20 can ask for a fair market value and then buy out the system at that price. At the very end of the contract, there's three options. You can continue the contract, say, hey, this is wonderful, let's keep going. Or you can say, okay, it's time, we'll take on the project that's ours. And then the last option, if you said, we're done, we don't want them on the roof and take them away, we'll do that as well. So those are really the two options, because we can, if the congregation decides to raise funds, we can do the first option as well, whether or not the lending is required. What's next?
I'm next, Rob.
Okay.
So I'm a very visual person. If I can't draw a picture of it or see a picture of it, I really struggle to understand it. So this is a picture that I drew partly just for my own understanding, but then I wanted to share that with you too, for those of you who are more visual. So this is really a picture of how that PPA option works. And this is the thing that got me so excited, because this is what makes it possible for any house of worship, any faith-based nonprofit to participate, regardless of what kinds of resources they have. So here's a nonprofit or a house of worship. They're typically, I mean, everybody does it this way. You buy your power from the utility. The red line is the power coming from the utility into your meter, and then that's powering your house of worship. And that utility is, producing the electricity through a number of different ways, but traditionally it's been mostly through coal burning. Now a lot of it is natural gas burning, and there's some renewables in there too. So you're getting your power from the utility, and you're paying the utility for that power. Here's the problem. It's fairly expensive, and you're creating a lot of, you're not creating these emissions yourself, but the power plant is creating these emissions. So there's lots of CO2 and other greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere. So here's another version. Here's our PPA version, where we're taking advantage of the sun. So as Rob mentioned, we have the SunWealth, who is an impact investor who wants to invest in these kinds of projects. So SunWealth pays Charthouse Energy to put solar panels on the roof or the parking lot or whatever it might be of the house of worship or the faith-based nonprofit. Those panels produce somewhere around 75% of the electricity that's needed by the organization. So the energy that's produced by the panels is going directly to the organization. Now there might be some overflow at certain times of day. There might produce more power than you can use. That goes through your meter and back to the utility, actually back to the grid. So there's also going to be some times when you're going to need, you may need additional power beyond what the panels can produce. In that case, you're still getting power from the utility through the grid and into your organization. So in the case of the PPA, the goal would be to have about probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 75% of the electrical energy that's required by the organization produced by those panels. And as we said previously, that's going to cost your organization about 10% less than you were paying before. So 75% of the power now comes from these panels, and you're paying less for it. Here's the only complicated part for the organization. It's not really complicated, but it's the only thing that's additional work, I guess you could say. Instead of having one utility bill, you now have two utility bills. So most of your utility bill is going to go to paying SunWealth, who owns those panels, and a little bit is still going to be going to pay the utility. So again, the idea here is about 75% of your power is coming from the panels. You're paying SunWealth for that power, but you're still paying utility maybe 25% for the additional power that you need, the remaining power. So remember our big cloud of emissions and our big dollar sign, that's now reduced. So you've effectively reduced your emissions, and you've also reduced your costs. And again, with this model, this PPA model, it didn't cost you anything to do this. And you don't have to maintain the panels either. So that's what's so exciting to me, is this idea that anybody can participate, regardless of what kind of resources you have to you can participate. So here's just an example, and I'm not going to go through this in detail, but I'm going to send you these slides afterwards. So if you're kind of a numbers cruncher and you want to try to figure out how this actually works, these next few slides should be helpful to you. So this model, or I mean, this example would be like $100,000 project, about a 25 kilowatt system. So again, 75% of the power is now being produced by these panels that have been put on the roof of this house of worship. 25% is still being paid to the utility, but for the 75%, the congregation is now paying 10% less than they were paying. And with the PPA contract, the rate does go up incrementally each year, but far less than the utilities rate will go up. So the utilities rate historically goes up about 3.5% per year. The rate for the PPA is going to go up 1.5% per year. So as time goes by, as the 25 years goes by, your savings actually increases. So here's a spreadsheet that shows how that all breaks down with the PPA model. And the only thing I would point you to here is at the bottom right-hand corner, the average annual, or the average monthly, the average annual savings, and then the overall savings. And then if you were to do the direct purchase model, you'll see the congregation does save more money over the course of time, but then you have the maintenance, and you also have to be able to raise some funds just to kick off the project. So that's kind of just a quick look at those two models that Rob described. So let's just go through what the process would look like if you're interested in pursuing this. And I'll ask Jennifer to walk through this.
Okay, thank you, Steve. So I'll just give you a really high level overview because it's really just as simple as expressing interest. So first of all, we have a form. The link is in this slide. We'll also send that out to you when we send out the slides. But yeah, if you can fill that out, that helps us to know of your interest. We'll also need an electric bill, or maybe 12, the past 12 months, depending on who your utility provider is. And then we'll provide you with a proposal that says, hey, based on your usage, this is what we think makes sense in your situation. And then we can have a conversation. We can set up a Zoom meeting just like this with you and members of your congregation. And if you decide to go forward with it, then the investor will need 2 years of financials. And once they approve your application, installation can begin.
Ta-da!
So some of our early participants, the first 5 houses of worship that have participated, we are starting construction, and we will finish this week with Faith Lutheran in North Muskegon. These are some of the panels that we're installing right now. And then after that's going to be, I think, either Faith Lutheran or the Refuge will come next. And then Trinity AME in Lansing. And at the same time, we're going to do a project for Ferry Memorial in Montague. Interestingly, they are the other 4 have all done a PPA, and Ferry Memorial has chosen to do the direct purchase. So it's an example of both of the options.
Okay, and then we do have Reverend Jerry Koenig on the call tonight. He's just going to share a few minutes what his experience has been so far with Solar Faithful. Jerry, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Awesome, loud and clear.
All right. Yeah, our church at the Refuge has been very involved in creation care for a long time. We've started working in a stream that runs through our facility or our land. And I've always wanted to move the congregation to be more concerned about a kind of a climate action thing. That wasn't always so easy. People wanted to care for clean water, but they weren't so certain about climate change and some of those things initially. Yet our work with our watershed really got people interested. They saw some things going on, and so we said, let's try to do something else. Let's try to do some solar here. And Steve had alerted me to some of these things going on, and so we got a hold of Rob. We had a few questions. We have a large facility. and a small congregation. It has just happened that way. We have about 50,000 square feet in our facility, and we have a congregation that meets about 60 people. So we've leveraged our facility to be more of a ministry center, and now we have 3 churches there. We have a couple of schools there. We have a variety of things going on during the week. We have about over 1,000 people coming through our church every week. So we're using it as a ministry center. And we said, let's do something. So we got a hold of Rob. We made the application. He came. We had a bunch of questions. The council had a bunch of questions. And Rob was just so good at going through us. We went on the roof together. We went into the basement together. We went everywhere together. And he answered the questions of the engineers and the construction people. And when it came time to talk about it and make a decision on it, it was a slam dunk. The whole council said, yes, this is something we have to do. And so we introduced it to our congregation, and they were just got combined behind it so quickly. It was amazing. They said, we want to be a place where, we are concerned about our environment, concerned about climate change, and we want the people that come here to realize that as well. So Rob has talked to us already about when we get going on this project, to put our energy savings right on the screen in the commons, so that everybody that comes in there can see, hey, you might not be able to see all the panels because we have a part flat roof and a part angled roof or sloped roof, but we want everybody to see that, we really want to make an impact on whatever we can do as far as our environment is concerned and climate change. And this is what we're doing. We've had a few hiccups along the road just because it was strange technical things, like our electrical service was listed as an address other than our church address. And that took a little while to get ironed out and stuff like that. But it was basically an easy decision for us. And people are asking, all right, when are we going to get those panels? They're excited about this new venture that we're going to go at caring for God's creation.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Jerry.
Sure.
Really appreciate it. So then just a word about, where do we see ourselves? Where are we right now? And where do we see ourselves, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? I think Donna joined the call. I don't know if you're able to take this, Donna, or Jennifer's planning on walking through it also.
Hi, I'm here, and
Okay.
thank you for welcoming me. Yeah, I'm not going to come off camera because I was just at the dentist and not a pretty sight. I'll just put it like that. But I am Donna Lee, and I'm the California Regional Organizer for the Climate Witness Project, and I'm a member of the Solar Faithful Board of Directors. And we're really pleased to say that 5 congregations are now currently under contract in the state of Michigan for the solar panels and for the arrays with Solar Faithful. But we're in conversation with well over 100 congregations and faith-based nonprofits. By the end of this year, we're really hoping that 55 Michigan NGOs and congregations will be participating. So when we talk about 10-year scaling, we're hoping to scale nationally, starting with Pennsylvania. I don't know if Alan Drew is on this call, but he's the CWP representative from there who'll be sort of helping to spearhead there. New Jersey, and then me here in California will join with the Solar Faithful team to press on there. And ultimately, we project that thousands of organizations are going to be participating. And that's other IPLs in other states, church and community organizations, and regional organizations, just activated in different states with representations of all faiths and racial identities. So we're thrilled about the prospects. And along the way, we will provide educational materials on solar and how to reduce carbon emissions and the most effective ways to use energy, and especially to use the solar arrays and for accountability with the solar arrays going forward. So yeah, that's the summation of it.
Awesome, great. Thank you so much, Donna. Appreciate you joining us right coming from the dentist. Earlier on, Jennifer mentioned this interest forum. There's the link again. I think she also put it in the chat. So if you are interested in pursuing this, just fill out that form and we'll get back to you and start that whole process. There's also my Solar Faithful email address at the bottom of the screen. If you want to email me with any questions or anything else, if you want to just talk about this one-on-one separately, that's great. Happy to do that too. So now we've got some time for Q&A. The one question I see,
It's a couple of questions. I
yeah,
can run through them pretty quick.
go ahead,
In
Rob.
terms of workforce development, the question is, do we go all the way to a NABCEP certification? And the answer is no. It's not our object to bring a person to become a certified installer. That's not the goal. The goal really is to take people who have traditionally been left out of construction, never really had a construction job, to get them to understand what a construction job is, get them some training with, fall safety and all other critical job site expectations, and really get them to understand what a job is, and then help them to get a permanent position in the industry. I'll give you an example. We had a young man in Ypsilanti when we did the project at the very beginning of the slides, and he had 25 years old, didn't have a permanent job, hadn't gotten a really good job, and the electrician liked him so much he took him on as an apprentice. So that's the direction I see is the real opportunity, is really to leverage this as an opportunity to get into the construction industry. If we, however, find somebody who's really good and should learn and become a certified installer, absolutely will help them get into a program that will get them there. There was a question about whether or not we can install batteries along with the system. That is something we are totally looking into, because we see houses of worship as a resilience center, as a shelter in the case of storms and other things. And so in those cases, we're really wanting to be able to support as a resilience center. And so we will look at whether or not we can afford the additional cost of adding batteries. Trying to go through these reasonably quickly so we have time for people to jump in. Great question about whether or not we need to incorporate, or whether we can incorporate the cost of the roof. This is also something that we're definitely looking into. And we're trying to figure out a way to incorporate the roof cost, and maybe the resulting cost of the project or PPA rate may be a little bit more than the cost of energy from the utility, but it will include the cost of the array, of the roofing underneath the array. We definitely look at all the question is, are there other financing sources such as grants, other federal funds for houses of worship outside of using Michigan Saves? We absolutely keep our ear to the ground for all of the available funding. And in some cases, we have Chart House Energy has successfully gotten about $2 million worth of grants from the USDA under their Rural Energy for America program, the REAP grant, and that is up to 40% now. And so there's opportunities in smaller communities that qualify for the rural community. It's possible that we might be able to get those grants as well. And so we try to look into that as if we can bring them in.
Rob, I think it's also worth mentioning that one of the reasons we're able to offer a discount is the federal government, through the Inflation Reduction Act, offers a tax credit, and that tax credit is built into the overall financial package. And so we're taking advantage of those incentives. There were incentives previous to the Inflation Reduction Act, but those were extended and those were increased back to 30%. And so that's part of the entire financials that lead to the benefit that we've described. Go ahead, Rob.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the question, there's additional question about, are we constrained by 20 kW? No, we're not constrained by any of the limits of the size of projects. However, we do, the reason that we size the projects to typically 3/4, between 2/3 and 3/4 of the project, of the usage of the congregation, is that the compensation from DTE and consumers, you pay about 18 cents a kilowatt hour for power. If we make excess and we sell it back to them, they pay around 10 cents. Since the PPA rate is only is 2 cents, is around 16.2 cents. So selling power to the utility at 10 or 11 cents isn't going to make any economic sense. So we size the system within the present structures. In the future, if we get back to true net metering or some other strategy where we compensated more heavily for the outflow, we'll absolutely add some more panels, load it up, and get to cover as much of your usage as possible. And so that's the methodology, the reason for going that route. Last item on the chat is that yes, the video will be the link to the video will be sent to everybody that's participated. So I'll open up to any other questions.
There was one other question about us working with Block Power. I'll try to cover that as best I can, and if there's remaining questions, please pose those either in the chat or just by raising your hand and asking your question. So I was actually the one that brought Block Power to the table. I was aware of Block Power through my work as chair of the Ann Arbor Energy Commission. Block Power is, as I mentioned, minority-led company. It's doing a lot of its work in BIPOC and low-income communities, and one of its target markets was houses of worship. They recognize that houses of worship have lots of members. Houses of worship are trusted entities, and they realize that if they can do electrification and energy efficiency upgrades with houses of worship, then it's more likely that congregants or members of that religious entity are likely to do the same thing. And so we had a lot of the same objectives, and we had complementary offerings. So we've been up until recently focusing on the solar side, and they had been focusing really on energy efficiency and replacing old appliances like boilers, like natural gas furnaces, like appliances, hot water heaters, etc., and doing the same thing with a no upfront cost package. Also, Block Power is actually pretty big. They've received something like $150 million in funding from a lot of major investors. They've signed, or they're part of an agreement with Ithaca, New York, to lead the decarbonization of the entire city. There's a decarbonization plan that Ithaca has, and Block Power is one of the key partners in that. And so we just felt that we were really ideal partners. And so we've been talking to them for roughly the last 9 months, and we finally inked our referral agreement. So one of the things that we'll have to do here is we just got their own interest form, and we need to then update our interest form so we cover their needs as well as ours, because what we would like to do when we talk with you is, what are your priorities? What might you do first? What might you do later down the road? And so we can take that into consideration. And we hope that as we earn your trust and we do a good job step by step, that either if we take the lead on solar, or if you take the lead with block power on energy efficiency and electrification, that the next step will be solar through us. So we see that as a really wonderful fit where the two organizations really have the similar values, similar target markets, and similar approach. So hopefully I answered that question.
And Rob, there is one more question about union carpenters and electricians. Can you address that? Do installers need to be union carpenters / electricians?
No, we work, as part of the IRA, they have the requirement, actually, we've always paid prevailing wages, which is basically union rate. It's not, we don't feel that it's necessary that a person needs to be a union employee, a union member to work in the industry. We do use licensed electricians and apprentices to do all the wiring, both DC and AC. So, and that's usually required as part of the permitting process.
And then a question about if you respond to people who ask, is solar actually viable in the state of Michigan? I assume they're talking about the cloudiness.
Well, the answer is yes. And there's several key reasons. One, we may not be as sunny as the desert states, but our price of electricity is quite a lot higher. It's almost 50% higher than the desert states. So the bottom line is the economics work, and they work very strongly.
Actually, it's interesting. The highest penetration of solar in the world is in Germany. It is largely, or to some significant degree, driven by incentives. And their solar access in Germany, or solar intensity, is much less than what it is in the United States. And the other element that's really made solar attractive is that the price has really dropped. It's continuing to drop. And so that's why solar is really attractive, even in places like Michigan, where if we look out in typical winter day, it doesn't look like it would make a lot of sense, but really it does this today. And one other thing, if I may, the target range that Rob talked about, that also could be affected by if you want to do battery storage. Battery storage is still relatively expensive, but if you're able to store your excess power and then use it at another time, or if you really have put a lot of importance on being a resilience center, then that excess power that you would generate and put back into the grid would go into your battery, and that would offset anything that you pull from the grid, or then provide resilience function if there's a power outage.
Thanks, John. I think we've gone through most of the questions in the chat. It's a little past the top of the hour, so if you drop, that's fine. We'll stay on if you have more questions. At this point, why don't you just unmute yourself and ask your question if you have a question.
Real quick, I saw recently that Michigan gets most of its renewables from wind as opposed to solar, and I wonder if you guys had looked at wind.
Yeah, you're totally right. In the utility scale wind, at 500 or 600 feet up is totally viable, but urban wind is really horrible. The wind, even just above the treetops, is very turbulent and a lot slower than the wind at elevation. So residential or commercial scale wind is just not viable, except if you're next to the water or in a like open space like a prairie or something.
I'm curious if you find that the church needs any kind of building upgrades or electrical upgrades in order to support panels, does that cost get rolled into the cost of the project?
Yes, in fact, there's a great opportunity to upgrade some of the electrical systems that become part of the solar project, and therefore qualify for the for the incentives, thus decreasing that installation cost. And yeah, we encourage it. In fact, the Ferry Memorial Project, we're upgrading their 200 amp service to a 400 amp service, and just incorporating it into the overall project.
And that's why the collaboration with Block Power is so important, so that we can talk with you ahead of time about what your long-term goals are. You may just have a short-term goal of doing, let's say, either solar and or electrification, but if we know that you want to take a stepwise approach to doing that, then it makes sense that we look at, as Rob was saying, your supply system, looking at your panels and everything like that, and do that upgrade once and not do that step by step by step. That doesn't make a lot of sense.
I've got a question for for anyone who might have some information about it. Jerry mentioned about wanting to help people see things that aren't visible. Maybe they're up on the roof. We have that in our church where we've put solar panels a few years, but I haven't had much luck finding the interface that would be not crazy expensive, that we could put that some kind of display, monitor, whatever, down near the entrance or in our hall or someplace. So any information about companies that provide that kind of package or interface would be very helpful, because we want to help celebrate and keep that in mind, in people's minds, that, oh yeah, there's panels up on that flat roof that you can't see.
Send me an email and I'll work with you to get that done. It's just Rob at solarfaithful.org.
John, do
Just
you
for
want to ask
everybody
a
that's
question?
just for everybody that's curious, I have solar on my roof, and what actually comes with the inverter is a software application, and you can actually have that displayed on your phone. You could have it displayed on a TV terminal in your congregation, and you can actually see all kinds of information about what's being produced. You can look at trends. It's a tremendous amount of information that's available, and that's what Rob would help you do.
Yeah, it's just my guess is that the inverters are not hooked up to the inverter monitoring software. I mean,
Well, no, I mean, I've got Solar Edge on my phone.
okay.
I just can't go around to the congregation saying, look at my phone. I'm looking for to put it into a monitor in the church.
Solar Edge has in one of the outputs, they have a dedicated URL for your data, and so you can access that through their web portal, and just look under kiosk display.
Will do.
I think John had a question about what kind of trades are involved in the installation, and is it purely electricians or does it involve carpenters or other trades?
We use the licensed electricians when we are touching the wires, and we use our installers to do everything else. There's no carpentry per se done. And when we are doing something with the roof, we work with a roofing contractor to, if there's any penetrations or other things, because we don't want to void the warranty of the roofing. So we work with the roofing contractor to make sure that that's done properly.
Other questions? Okay, thanks again, everyone, for being on the call. Greatly appreciate it. Do fill out the interest form if you're interested in pursuing this. I will send out both the slide deck and the recording of tonight's program.
And please share that with any other people that you know.
Absolutely.
All
And
right.
by the way,
Okay.
when we're talking about religious nonprofits, I mean, there are a lot, these are schools, these are, let's say, the location of your synod or something like that, whatever the case may be. So there's lots of opportunities beyond simply houses of worship. Think about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, residential as well. I mean, housing as well. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for
Thanks,
joining.
everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Great.
Appreciate it
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.